Hey everybody, so for this week, change of scenery for you. However, today I'm going to be talking a little bit about prayer. Kind of what is prayer? What forms of prayer are there? So that's going to be what we're going to be diving into. So I'm first going to start with a quote from Saint Therese of Lisieux. She is a truly wonderful saint. If you really want to look her up, she's one who died, I believe, at 24 years old of tuberculosis. But she was known for just her way of prayer, her way of loving people through the small things. And she was one who became a doctor of the church, which is one of the highest forms of recognition that you can give in the church to a saint. It's doctor of the church, somebody who has, just enlightened people so much. And the crazy thing is, she's this uneducated girl who just wrote a diary. And that was huge. So it's really cool to see somebody like her get such high recognition, even though she's this uneducated girl who dies at such a young age, who just lived in a convent. And all she did was love the person in front of her. That's a side note just because St. Therese is awesome and I love her so much. But this quote from her is so good when it comes to prayer. She talks about, and she says, "For me, prayer is a surge of the heart. It is a simple look turned towards heaven. It is a cry of recognition and of love, embracing both trial and joy." What does that mean? So when you boil it down, it means that prayer is a relationship. Prayer is a conversation. Prayer is an entering into just really being with the Lord. That's all it is. If you take nothing from it, take that prayer is a relationship. And if you think of any of your relationships here on earth, they can model that relationship that you can have with God. And that's prayer. So it is really just that continuation of conversation with God, but it comes from a place of desire for the other. She says it's a cry of recognition and of love. So you're recognizing God, who not only is our creator, God who is the one who has the best in mind for us. I said we were created for happiness, for wholeness, for holiness, for fulfillment. I said that in the last video. And so with this one, we recognize God in that. We recognize God in our desires, but it's of love because we believe in a God who created us out of love and for love and to be loved. We're going to get into that definitely more throughout the weeks, that specific point right there. However, but that's prayer. That's prayer right there. So if you really want to think of prayer in such a way, it's that building of a relationship. I like to think of it kind of in terms almost of like my relationship with my wife, or if you can think of it in terms of a relationship with a significant other. That's kind of a good way to think about prayer. Because how do we treat that other person? We recognize the goodness that they have. We recognize just the amazingness about them, but we also recognize how we want to be with them, how we want to spend time with them. And there's different ways that we spend time with them. I had it explained to me on a retreat once where the priest who was leading it, he talked about three forms of being. Three forms of just being with somebody. The first one is that kind of casual conversation. You get into that, especially with friends, especially even with your significant other. You get into that just, how's the weather? Oh, I did this at work. I did, just that casual conversation. And that's a great way to enter into conversation with the Lord. If you want to have a conversation with the Lord, just tell him about your day. Hey, this happened today. I felt like this. That's actually a very good way to pray. That's the first level. And that's kind of how we start entering into those deeper conversations. And that's the second level. Second level is that deeper conversation that, you might be a little bit more emotional. You might be sharing a bit more of yourself. You might be a bit more vulnerable and open. So you're kind of talking about just those things that are truly on your heart, those things that really, really impact you. And so that's what you're going to be diving into when you're talking about that deeper conversation. You're really struggling with this here in your life. You're really hoping for this. You're really, really just diving into what you might not share with other people. And it's that confidence that you have in the other person. And in this instance, that other person is God. And really just being able to share that with him. And so that kind of leads us into that third layer of being, which is just being. Have you ever had that moment with somebody And we often find that with that significant other, but just that ability just to be with them. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to do anything. You can just be with them and be happy. And it's great. That's kind of that third mode of just being that we want to see if we can be able to touch upon with the Lord. If you can get that with the Lord, that is fantastic. And it might take, time. It might take practice. It might take, constantly just being open. But if you can hit that point, that's so cool. It's such a cool feeling to just be able to just be with the Lord. And that is, something that the saints truly were able to hit, something that the saints were truly able to experience, something that they were able to truly talk about. So that's kind of like, when you boil it down to, okay, this looks like our real relationships in life, like right now, it kind of makes sense of, okay, well, how can I approach the Lord in a similar way? Because if I approach the Lord in a way of the Lord is my friend, or the Lord is a beautiful, loving Father that wants to be with me, or something that wants to, that is actually a really cool way to enter into prayer. But it begins with that simple look towards heaven. There's so many saints that talk about even just a look towards heaven, even just a recognition of that love, even just whatever it is, even if it's just a simple prayer of Jesus, I love you. That is so powerful because it's that recognition and that offering of that conversation, of that come be with me. That's so beautiful of a prayer, even if it's that simple 3 words. Jesus, I love you. No, 4 words. I'm terrible. I can do math, I swear. Okay, so the one thing that's super important here in that quote of Saint Therese is that it embraces both trial and joy. It is honest. It is bare. I can tell you the best prayer I have ever had is when I have sat in a church by myself when it is completely silent, at night, and I have just yelled my heart out to the Lord. Being honest with the Lord, crying out in that way, and having that vulnerability and that ability, that confidence to, whether it is, yell or truly yell, even if it's just in our hearts. Being honest in our prayers is the most important thing we can be. Again, if you think about God as like a parent may know things already about us, but they want to hear where we're at. They want to hear us say it. They want to have that conversation with us to help us through it. And God, as perfect parent, wants to do that as well. So honesty in your prayer life, even if it is just with God, is such an important thing to be able to try to have. And that's what I encourage you in your prayer throughout, or in your meditation throughout these weeks, to try and have that honesty, to try and really be able to enter into that. So as we talk, prayers a relationship, prayers a conversation. If you base it off of, how you've been able to do good relationships with other people, you should have a good experience with prayer. I'm going to give you a couple other things to talk about, what prayer actually is. So there's kind of 3 forms of prayer. The first one is vocal prayer, second one's meditation, and the third one's contemplation. So that first one, vocal prayer. Really, you're just vocalizing what is on your heart, that kind of thing. So there's 2 versions, forms, types, whatever you want to say, of vocal prayer. And the first one is kind of like the memorized prayers. And that one is prayers that were kind of given to us that we can take, we can memorize, and they've got kind of a script that we can work with. I think of it kind of like, when I tell my wife, I love you. That's something that I didn't make up. As simple as it is, I didn't make that up. And I'm telling her something that is good, that is true, but that was given to me. And there's many other things. I can say a poem to her. I can, and it still be so meaningful, even if it's not my own words. If I say that poem to her, it means much coming from me because I'm saying what I mean, even if somebody else wrote it. That's kind of your memorized prayer. You've got your Our Father, which many people are very familiar with. You've got the Hail Mary. You've got like the St. Francis Prayer of Peace. Make me an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. Where there's injury, pardon. Where there's doubt, faith. Where there's despair, hope. And you've got yada, yada, yada. It's a longer prayer, but again, a memorized prayer. Why do we have these? Because memorized prayers are written by people who, frankly, are smarter. And not smarter, but smarter in, the faith sense. And have such a grasp of this so they know what is good to say. And so like, taking a poem and saying it to my wife, I can take these prayers and say it to God, and it still be meaningful, even if it's not the direct words I wrote. Memorized prayers are fantastic. However, memorized prayers will never be enough for a person because we also need to be completely honest. And that's where that spontaneous prayer comes in. Spontaneous prayer is where we make up the script, where we are saying what's on our hearts. The examen is a beautiful form of the spontaneous prayer. And it really is, like I said, just coming up with what's on our hearts. But the examen itself is a prayer that kind of takes us through our day and sees where God is in that day. So we look at it and we are able to speak to God and say, God, I saw you here. God, I didn't see you here. God, I struggled here. I was great here. And this is where I want to be tomorrow. So it kind of has that conversational basis where we're entering into that with the Lord. So the examen is one that I do want us to get into throughout these weeks, and is one that we will. But just be aware that is one that really is that conversation, and it enters into that spontaneous stuff that you're going to be doing. Another one is the Acts prayer. I think of this one as basically how to pray a prayer. If you're trying to think of a good way or things that are good to recognize with God, ACTS. It's those 4 letters, Acts. And so the first letter, each one of these stands for a letter of things we can do in prayer. Acts is adoration. It's the most important. It's basically recognizing, God, you are God. God, you are higher. You're the most powerful. You are the creator of everything. Recognizing God is God. C is contrition, which is basically, if God, you're God, I'm not. I'm human. I've got feelings. I have struggles. I struggled with this test. I struggled with this professor. I struggled with even just staying awake, listening to this person. Even those. Or I, was not great yesterday. I was stupid. That's contrition. I am not God. God, you're God. I'm not. And then going into Thanksgiving. God, you've given me so many blessings. I appreciate, the life that you've given me. I am so excited for the opportunity. I thank you for being able to yada, yada, yada. Thanksgiving. It's a beautiful recognition. And I think is a very important one. Psychologically, it has been proven that those who show their thankfulness are happier people in general. Those who show their thankfulness and say it in a real way are happier people in general. And the final one is supplication. Supplication, think of the word supply. Supply us, O Lord. And it's really just going into asking for something. After we've been thankful, then we can ask for something. And that's where we get into the desires of our hearts. That's where we get into that really huge honesty. But that's after we've been able to recognize God as God, your will above my own. That's where we get into that contrition where I am not God. And then that thankfulness, I'm thankful for what I do have. Okay, then I can go forward with that supplication, that supply us, O Lord, because I've been able to have a very good, well-rounded mindset entering into that. So we've got vocal prayer, we've got spontaneous, which is split into spontaneous and memorized prayers. Both are important. We want to say the things that are great to say, but we also want to be honest. And with those, we have that conversation. We have that relationship built in a beautiful way. The other 2 forms, meditation and contemplation, I'm going to give a brief, these ones I'm going to be brief about. But before I do, I'm going to give our concept question right now. So the concept question, I want you to talk about vocal prayer. I want you to talk about memorized prayer and spontaneous prayer. Give me your understanding of those 2, and take from other sources if you feel necessary. But what are they? What is vocal prayer? What are the 2 parts of vocal prayer? How do they work? Have you encountered these in your own life? And why are they important? Not only from what I said, but why would they be important to you? So, and if you're not religious, use this as a, why would there be mantras or different scripts that we can use for like anxiety calming us down, different things that we can say, different things that we can remember. why are there good ones for that? But also things like therapy, that might be, your version of spontaneous prayer, being able to enter into that. It's kind of taken in that sort of sense if you're not religious. But if you are religious, definitely look into like a memorized prayer versus spontaneous prayer. If you aren't religious, I still hope that you would touch upon those. Why are they important to the church, but also to yourself? So what is vocal prayer? What are the two parts of it? And why are they important? That's what I want you to get into. So the other two, like I said, very briefly going to cover it. I'm going to end this video within a minute or so. But meditation and contemplation. We think of this kind of as like going towards God and coming back to us. And so meditation is that like quest, that seeking, that active seeking for God. It plays a very active role. You might maybe think of a specific image that you can focus on. You've got the image of Christ. There's beautiful images where Christ is just, his eyes are just really like seeking deep into your soul, and you're like, Lord, I want to be with you. I want to enter into that like relationship with you. But you have other ones like the Rosary. That's where you can pray and meditate on specific instances of Christ's life. It's that active searching and diving into, I want to be with you. Contemplation is the Lord coming to us. So you've got meditation, where it's that active seeking and going out towards. Contemplation is, all right, I'm going to take a step back. Lord, I'm going to let you speak to me, and I'm going to just be so that you can speak. Think of that third layer of being, where it's just that silence, where you're with the other person, and you can just let them fill your soul. It's not always the easiest one to do. It's a very tough one to get to at times. But try to think just truly being alone with God in solitude. And my one recommendation with that is don't try to jump straight to contemplation. Contemplation is not one that you're going to be able to do that with. Let the spontaneous prayer happen. Let that vocal prayer happen. Let the meditation happen where we're actively seeking. And then if you find yourself in a moment where God is speaking to you, let that be. That's my recommendation to you guys when you're entering into that. Lectio Divina, which is the prayer that we're going to be mainly focusing on. You've taken your walk into nature. You are focusing on something in Scripture. That has meditation and contemplation aspects in it. So you're really doing that searching, that seeking based upon a biblical Scripture. But then you're trying to see if the Lord can speak to you as well. You're not always going to get it. You're not always going to get, this crazy message from God. However, we try to be there present so that if God does speak, we can be there. That's especially why we're utilizing this form of prayer. And that's what I got for you guys talking about prayer. So we've talked a lot about that relationship, vocal prayer, meditation, contemplation, Lectio Divina. Definitely use the Examen. It should be in our resources. If you don't see it there, send me an email. But again, I'm going to just end with that quote from St. Therese. For me, prayer is a surge of the heart. It is a simple look turned towards heaven. It's a cry of recognition and of love, embracing both trial and joy. Have a wonderful week, guys. I'll see you in the discussion boards.